Hello, and welcome to Wine with Wita, the podcast that is dedicated to engaging with health professionals and caregivers in meaningful discussions. I'm your host, Rita Shamoon, or as my clients call me, Wita. I'm a pediatric speech pathologist, and I am so excited to have you here. Each week, we deep dive into connecting you with caregivers and healthcare professionals, sharing their insights, stories, and key takeaways to help you with your child's diagnosis and your journey. Whether you are a parent, healthcare professional, a lifetime learner, or simply a wine enthusiast, you're in the right place. So let's sit back and relax and enjoy today's episode. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to a wonderful episode of Wine with Wita. Today, I'm bringing you a hot topic that I have in my therapy room, in my mother's group, with my husband, the concept of feeding and pediatrics. It is a topic that I discuss with all my clients because sometimes feeding our kids is just so hard that sometimes we say, surrender, do what you want. I just need you to eat. And I thought today, I didn't want to go down the speech pathology path because speech is, yes, although we do work with feeding, it's always nice to have another allied health professional who specializes in pediatric feeding from a different lens, particularly neurodiverse kids. So today I have the most beautiful woman named Rachel Zabel. She is a pediatric dietitian and a feeding therapist from Fun, Family and Food. Welcome to Wine with Wita, Rachel.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here.
I cannot wait to pick your brain because with my caseload, all the parents ask me, how can I get my child to eat more vegetables? My child's on a beige diet. All I do is put my child in a screen just to make them eat. And I'm actually quite speechless because I'm like, I don't know what to do. My course didn't teach me that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Rachel, please tell the listeners about your expertise, who you are, and what brings you to Wine with Wita today.
Excellent. Well, my background story is kind of two parallel stories almost. So I'm a mum to four beautiful kids, and it was about probably 7 years ago with my third child that my heart kind of whispered, this is not normal. Like the struggles she was having, the daily battles, behaviors that we hadn't seen in any of the other kids and just didn't seem to make sense. And we just didn't know what to do. Things like she would scream. I remember the most blood curdling scream that I'm surprised the neighbors didn't call the police one night because she had to brush her teeth, and there was no amount of discussing, motivating, bribing, setting timers, trying to help her. We'd bought every version of toothpaste, every version of toothbrush, and now I look back and I know, well, it was a sensory thing, but
Yeah.
back then I just had zero concept of neurodiversity, of sensory differences, of like how autism can show up in girls, especially. I didn't know really anything much about autism at all, but especially, the image you have in your head is like Rain Man, or the image of ADHD is like a hyperactive boy. And that's just never connected the dots. And even my mum, who's a school teacher and principal, and like, it's funny how 7 years we were struggling and she was like looking after her, and we'd always think, what is going on? And it took until she was that older, and then I think a light bulb clicked in my mum's brain to go, and she Googled ADHD in girls, and she showed it to me, and like, tick, 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 tick,
Yeah.
tick. So we went down, we got the diagnosis and ADHD and autism, definitely a PDA profile with her autism. And that did explain a lot, but it still felt like we were drowning. Like it took a long time from that diagnosis, like to find the right team who actually understood her and her behaviors. Yeah, that was a long journey.
How old was your daughter at the time?
She was about 6 or 7. She was in
Sure.
grade one or grade two, when it got to the point where we were like,
Yeah.
pediatrician, we need to look at this.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes,
Do you feel through your own personal experience that's where you became more specialized in pediatric feeding and neurodiverse kids because of your own lived
oh
experience? You
yeah,
could relate to parents better?
definitely. And just we were obviously, when we got that diagnosis, we were sort of thrust into the world of neurodiversity and had to try and figure it out. And it took a couple of years, but I remember we finally found a counsellor who really helped my child. It was like she just
Mm,
knew her from the day she was born, because she just got her and she helped us so much. And she put us on to a podcast called The Baffling Behaviour Show, Robin Goebel,
yeah,
if you've heard of that one.
heard of that name. Yeah.
Um, and I was like, my nervous system was fried. It was so hard. And I was driving. I work for Blue Care part time, so aged care and supporting adults in their homes. And I remember listening to that podcast and I was just weeping because
Yeah.
finally a professional who actually gets it and actually understands and validates and doesn't, with so long of being dismissed and gaslighted and telling people, but no one understood.
Yeah.
So that was like a turning point, and that she really deep dives into the nervous system and how to actually understand what's going on and looking beneath the behaviours that you see, and that
Yeah,
really really
yeah.
helped. And I did see other like SOS and other trainings,
Yeah.
responsive feeding and stuff, for the feeding side of it,
Yeah.
because I wanted to help families like mine.
I love that. And I guess what you really raised there is the nervous system. And as an allied health professional, you really need to have that extra professional development and, most importantly, a range of clinical experiences through your clients to understand the how. Now,
Yes.
it's so easy for me to go do the SOS feeding course or the Babble and Talk
Yeah.
feeding course. But until you have those clients and really see them on a weekly basis, you can tackle it. I
Yes.
want to ask a question. The concept of fussy eating is
Yeah.
so broad
Yes.
that can range from a child being on a beige white only diet to a child only eating chicken to a child only having chicken nuggets. How can you define in layman's term what does fussy eating mean?
Firstly, the term itself is probably not. It's one I try and avoid using if I can, but I know that's what kind of
Yeah.
most people relate to, and what parents would
Mm,
say is, my kid's so fussy or they're so picky. Um, I suppose looking at it like this, see, there's going to be a bit of a spectrum.
there's a
Like,
lot to say. Yeah.
like we all have food preferences and foods we like and don't like and ways of eating ourselves. With kids, we can think about it from the point of view of, um, most kids go through a fussy stage around two, that
Mm,
sort of neophobia where they're scared of new foods, and they're starting to go through the I can do it autonomy phase. And, there is, for almost every child, will go through a bit of a stage of what you could call fussy, or from when they might have eaten everything when they were little, around two or three, they might kind of
mm,
drop off. I suppose it's when you are getting to the point of they're dropping foods, they're very distressed about foods, it's really impacting their functioning, they get very anxious. New foods might result in a complete meltdown.
mm,
One thing different and they lose the food forever. It's that, you can sort of look at it on that spectrum from kind of normal, typical,
mm,
developmentally normal picky eating towards more restrictive. And then you can get to where we would classify it as something like ARFID or a pediatric feeding disorder. And it's kind of,
mm,
you can think about it according to sort of how many foods your child has. So if they have less than 10 or 15 foods, that's kind of getting into that range of ARFID or pediatric feeding disorder.
mm.
Really those sort of factors I said of how does it impact their functioning? How does it impact the family?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say, how does it impact their function? So being quite particular with certain types of foods and the behaviors they display with that. What
Yeah.
characteristic can parents look out for?
I always recommend something that, like, I sort of call it nervous system mapping. So
Hmm.
behaviors, obviously the behaviors that you see are only a reflection of, that's the way the kids communicate. So that's a reflection of what's
Mm,
going on underneath. So if you're seeing things like signs of dysregulation, like um, just I call it tiger brain,
yeah.
which is fight or flight. So they might be just more heightened on the more,
Hmm.
you could say, aggressive side, and they might throw on the extreme end, they might throw the food, they might run away from the table, they get quite worked up, and you can see that
Yeah.
dysregulation, they're yelling. Or some kids go to what I would call turtle mode, shut down, overwhelm. So freeze fawn type mode, and they'll sit and they'll delay, they'll try every strategy to pretend it's not there, they'll
Mm,
kind of go into that shutdown mode, 2 bites and I'm done.
yeah.
You can sort of, by looking at the behaviors that you see at mealtime, you can kind of get an idea of what's actually going on for the child
Sure.
underneath. Yeah.
Just from even just this discussion, it's so specific to every client and the behavior that they're exhibiting. So, for anyone listening to this podcast, this is obviously a way for you to understand it better, but definitely seek the additional support because the advice is very different. And I feel the conversation today is specific for neurodiverse kids, particularly ASD kids. Um, I'm really curious with the whole shutdown bit. How
Mm.
does a child transition from eating most foods and then overnight only drinking their milk or only having their food preferences? Why does that happen? Like from your experience, what do you notice?
Um, it's often not necessarily overnight, but certainly it can be if it's overnight, literally, I would think, has there been some
Yeah.
sort of traumatic event? Something's gone on. Often it's kind of
Yeah.
gradual. It might feel like overnight, but it's like, might be over a period of several months or something. Um, it might be due to, it's hard to diagnose,
Yeah, it is.
when they're little, and maybe it was, as kids grow, their nervous and sensory system might become more sensitive over time,
Mm,
as they grow for a neurodivergent child and start getting into kindy and prep and school and the demands of life and
mm,
functioning, daily functioning can just get harder and harder, and that can push them out of their window of tolerance for food. By the end of the day, they're done, and it's like,
mm.
I cannot do
Yeah.
food, especially not new foods at all. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably,
You've
yeah.
you've mentioned the word nervous system a few times there.
Yeah.
Do you feel you need to work in collaboration with occupational therapists or even chiros to like a whole multidisciplinary approach to meet the need or feeding needs for a child? Or is it one sole allied health member that can achieve it?
Oh, definitely a team is awesome, where people can
Mm,
access. Obviously, that can be the challenge, is the wait lists, and
yeah.
you find the right therapist and then they leave and then you start again,
Yeah.
and just funding and can be a challenge. So ideally, yes, a team is
Yeah.
amazing when you can achieve it. Can really,
Yeah.
really get great results. Yeah.
Yeah. So important that it's not just one allied health professional. And I think we did mention this in our previous chat that when a parent sees a pediatrician, there's so much more than they're just a speech and OT that dietitians also need to be included and also maybe even physios. And it's about respecting every allied health professional to
Yeah.
understand we're meeting a child's need holistically because I can't do it all as a speechy, nor can you do it all as a
Right.
dietitian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm more curious now about autism
Mhm.
and what challenges do autistic kids face when it comes to feeding?
There can be lots. Probably the nervous and the sensory system is the most
Yeah.
common ones that I'm coming across, where I suppose if you think about autism being like a neurodevelopmental kind of difference, where it's like that nervous and sensory systems are more sensitive, more vulnerable to stresses or to that sensory input. They feel that a lot more
Mm.
deeply and notice it. So, and feeding, of course, is highly sensory with the smells and the touches, the feel and how the feeling in your mouth and all that sort of stuff. So, definitely sensory and nervous system. Also, probably like if you think about the autistic brain likes to work in with repetition and in patterns and like they
Mm.
have a strong preference for sameness in a lot of things, in routines, and changes in any daily routine can be hard and feeding can be the same. So they often feel a lot more regulated when things are very
Mm.
predictable and the same all the time.
Yeah.
They might have had the gut sort of picture can be a big part too, like the percentage of autistic kids with gut symptoms, whether it's sort of
Mm.
constipation or reflux or something like that, is really, really high. And that obviously can be
Yeah.
part of the picture as well.
I love that word gut health, and I feel like so many autistic kids have gut concerns. Can we dig deep into a bit more into that? What does gut health mean to you, and why the link to autistic kids?
Yeah, it's fascinating, really fascinating for me.
Mm.
And part of, I suppose, before I started working with kids, I worked a lot in gut health too, in adults as well. So it's always been just a general interest of mine. But,
Yeah.
when you start looking at, you know, from as a research, bit of a research nerd and PhD background, I just found all the papers so fascinating and
Yeah.
the impact on things like IBS and other conditions and the link with gut health there, and then combining that with so many clients that I see, and most of them, it's constipation is the issue that they
Yeah.
really, really struggle with. Um, and so, and yeah, it's just fascinating, and I'm always trying to look at how can I help my clients more.
Yeah.
Um, and just the research on, the autistic kids tend to have a different microbiome, so a different kind of gut
Mhm.
bacteria, patterns of gut bacteria than neurotypical kids, and
Yeah.
sort of deep diving into how can we help these kids when their diets are
Yeah.
restrictive, they're getting symptoms, and what can we do?
Yeah. Yeah. Four of my patients just came to my mind right now because they're on the spectrum, and constipation is a big thing in their lives right now. And they're seeing a pediatrician to give them a specific antibiotic to help them soften the bowels
Yes.
and, so forth.
Yeah.
From your experience, if a parent was listening to this now, what's one piece of advice that you could give them to help support their child's gut right now if they're experiencing constipation?
Constipation. Um, I often think of the three things as, in terms of nutrition kind of strategies, as the dietitian hat, like fiber, fluid, and movement.
Mm-hmm.
So often autistic kids also struggle with hydration, which can kind of
Yeah.
maybe be something you don't always think about, but that can
Yeah.
help with the tummy. Food first is always the preference. If your child doesn't eat vegetables, like they can still get the fiber from fruit, and a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
nutrients are a crossover. So if they're at least having some fruit every day, try not to stress then too much about the vegetable piece, because they will be getting the fiber from the fruit, and maybe you could increase this. Don't be afraid to give them more fruit then if they're not eating the vegetables, so they're getting the fiber. Looking at the fluid, looking at their movement, the not necessarily nutrition lens, but just the whole bowel behaviors and stuff like other
Yeah.
withholding, and it can all link in with the neurodiversity that often they will
Yeah. Yeah.
withhold at school, and looking at that bigger picture as well. And often the range of fiber is not necessarily accessible, and in that case there are some really helpful colorless, odorless, tasteless
Yeah.
fiber supplement options, and quite often I recommend them, just
Yeah. Yeah.
beneficial for the gut.
Of course, of course. You mentioned previously about autistic kids and how they might have a preference with the way things are colored, the way things taste, texture, like from a sensory profile. The first thing that came to my head was the beige white diet that a lot of kids eat, the rice,
Yeah.
the cheese, the
Yeah.
bread, the chicken
Yes.
nuggets, because they're quite similar.
Yeah.
Is that purely because of that sensory preference? Is that why children have that beige diet?
that can be a really big part of it. Those foods are predictable. They're also easy to chew. So a lot of these kids,
Mm,
because they can have muscle tone issues, and that extends to the muscles, in the hands for coordination of feeding and chewing and swallowing and managing the food. So often those easier to chew, softer foods,
mm.
I just that's what they'll gravitate towards. Um, they're very predictable, always the same. Hopefully, you can keep getting the same brand. It's a problem when the brand
Yeah,
changes, doesn't it?
it is.
Yeah. The texture is often just the same. So that really just, I think, helps. The sensory sameness can really help them feel more regulated then in their nervous
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
If a parent's listening now and they're just cooking spaghetti every day or boiled rice every day and they just want their child to have some sort of protein or a vegetable,
Yeah.
what advice could you give them just to slightly introduce that extra food item to a child's diet?
Yeah. Firstly, I think I suppose, as much, of course, parents always are coming with that desperate like hope
Yeah.
to get some meat in, to see some green on their plate, to like, and but we can't start with, I suppose, reframing the goals or the expectation,
Mm,
that we can't start with eating, because eating's the last step. And until we can get set up the meal times where the child's regulated and calm and like in their window of tolerance, what I call the owl brain, like you don't want to be forcing at the eating step when then we need to build skills and
mm,
regulation before that. In terms of meal times, I would say I often suggest family style service. Is that
no,
something
what is
familiar
that?
to you? If I
No.
say that,
Tell me, what's family styled
so
service?
yes. So all the foods that are available are kind of laid out in the middle of the table or at a serving counter, and everyone can
Mm,
choose what they'd like to eat. So parents are in charge of deciding what food is available at that mealtime,
like a
and
buffet.
like a buffet, yes. And the kids are then in charge, yes, in charge of
Instead of the
deciding what they're
casino
going to.
buffet at
Yeah.
home.
So instead of pre-plating, like allowing the child to choose,
Yeah.
and the kids are then in charge of deciding what they're going to eat from what's available, how much they're going to eat, and even whether they're going to eat, because we really want to
Mm,
respect a child's autonomy to choose.
yeah.
Um, that's called the division of responsibility.
Mm,
I find that with neurodiverse kids, extreme picky eaters, the families that I work with, that alone, that's like the goal, but it's not often enough, because these kids, like, I have families who have done that every single night for years, and their kids like, no, still no broccoli, no,
yeah.
no, no,
Yeah.
and they really need, in that case, we really need the therapy or the building the skills and showing the child the steps. It's like
Yeah.
learning to swim or learning to read. It's like they're
Yeah.
not just going to be able to just do it. There's a lot involved in them for them to
Yeah.
pick up that broccoli. Sometimes they need it. So division of responsibility is great, but often we just need some more scaffolding and more support at the meal times.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not an easy road, is it? It's
No,
not just here, put all the food out, the child
no,
eats there. And the thing is, if the child doesn't eat, right,
yeah,
as a mother,
yeah,
you just get this sick gut feeling that your child is going to bed hungry,
yeah,
and you resort to giving them their food preference or even a cup of milk or a bottle of milk.
yeah,
And then there goes the pattern or the
yeah,
behavior
yeah,
all over again.
yeah.
What advice can you give to parents when the child chooses not to eat? Just give up and surrender, let them have what they want, or slowly persevere?
I would say to modify that family style service, and in terms of parent provide, child decide, especially for kids who really have these feeding challenges,
Mm,
always one of those modifications we need to do is always provide a safe food. And when I say
okay.
safe food, I mean like a food the child feels safe with, that they eat probably
Mm,
at least 50% of the time pretty reliably, that doesn't sort of cause any dysregulation. So the child's coming to the table knowing that there will be something predictable and something that they can quite comfortably
Yeah.
eat, and that helps settle their nervous system as well. So then, decrease that anxiety a little bit, and it just helps make sure they get some volume in, because that is the goal, obviously, of the
Yeah.
meal, is that they eat something. So if there
Mm.
is at least one safe food, and if they, what we can work towards in therapy then is helping them bring those other foods from the middle of the table to their plate, and that's okay. And then the next step might be bringing it,
Close to
touching
the
and
mouth.
interacting, and then bringing it closer to the mouth and smelling and licking. And that's something we can work on between meals as a sort of therapy process.
Yeah.
At the meals, if you can set it up so that the child is regulated, calm, there's a safe food there that they can fill up on, they know they can fill their tummy there. And you can decide as a family whether you think having, you decide when the next mealtime is. So you might choose to serve
Mm.
a supper or have milk before bed, or you might not, depending on the age of your child and what's going on in your family. Um, but if you can sort of keep that in mind, as this is my job as a parent, my
Yeah.
child's job is in charge of what they're going to eat and how much.
Yeah. Yeah. So agree with that. Something that just came to my mind as well earlier with, so if it's a safe food, you say the child prefers to have the rice, that's the first option, and then have a second somewhat safe food. So that might be chicken fingers or so forth. And the third less likely food might be cucumber sticks or tomatoes. So the child can at least understand the options there
Yeah.
and then pick that safety for to support their nervous system,
Yes.
and then they're still
Yeah.
filling up as opposed to resorting to milk or something after.
That's right. Yeah. And you can say
Yeah,
things like this, these are the foods that are available tonight. The next eating opportunity is going to be supper, or it's going to be breakfast the next day. This is when we're eating. So if everyone knows that mealtime routine, and you've
concept of
set
control as
that
well,
up.
isn't it? That predictability. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
So cooking with your children, going shopping with your children and letting them explore the foods, touching
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pretending to like them is all part of the process. Before we started, I noticed two gorgeous animals behind you, a turtle, I believe, and
Yeah.
a tiger or a
Yes.
lion. Now
Yes.
in therapy, yeah, hello.
Yeah.
Now, in speech therapy, it's all about connection, which creates communication, and play always creates or supports that connection element.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, I'm assuming that's the same pathway for you to
Yes.
allow the child to explore. We have to
Yes.
connect,
Yes.
and how children connect
Yeah.
is through
Play.
play.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me how you incorporate the idea of play with feeding to support a child's feeding and trying different foods.
Yeah. So definitely a massive part of any therapy is the play and the like to build that connection and to regulate the child. And we use the teddies, and they all love the teddies and can really relate to them. And otherwise, obviously, we're doing other games and play. And I always talk to parents about, you know, the the mealtime prep starts before you get to the table, where
Yeah.
thinking about meeting the sensory and connection needs throughout the day, and it's so worth investing like 10 minutes before the meal,
Mm,
regulating their body. And if they might be a bit in their tiger brain and their big muscles need some movement, something active, even
yeah.
like a stress ball at the table, or like really looking at that nervous system, to get them feeling more regulated. Sometimes even just having play, like play will, it's sort of that process of, think of it as every sort of play-based exposure will rewire the brain towards a feeling
Yeah,
of
I've heard of that
safety.
quote. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think they say repetitions
yeah,
for a child to learn a new skill without play, it's about 300 repetitions, but through play, it's about 12
yeah,
repetitions. So if we want a child to learn how to touch a certain food, I'm
yes,
assuming,
yeah,
incorporate the play to increase the
absolutely,
consistency
yeah,
and awareness around it. Yeah.
yes. And it's really important, I think, to distinguish between, often people think, okay, we'll play and it'll be like, here comes the broccoli, and it's
Yeah.
a flying
Tom, tom, tom,
spoon,
tom,
or,
tom.
and it's, kids have this neuroception, where they can pick up their nervous system or pick up your nervous system. If they can tell that the play is you like desperate to get that broccoli in their mouth, yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas what we want to think about with our play is, this is helping my child feel safe. This is building connection between us. And it's not about getting them to eat the broccoli now. It's actually
Yeah.
about rewiring the brain so that over time they can choose to explore the broccoli when they want, and they're not going to have a meltdown, you know. So
Yeah.
it's, it's that longer term goal with the play, rather than
Yeah.
I'm going to try and get this to your mouth, because kids will pick
Yeah.
so so
It's
easy.
not about eating the broccoli.
That's right.
It's the pathway to getting them to connect to the broccoli so
Yes.
they can have a wider preference
Yes.
about even the texture of a broccoli, the taste of the
Yes.
broccoli, the color of the
Yes.
broccoli.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
might not even eat the broccoli, but they
Yeah.
might eat a celery stick or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that now. I understand that.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
so fascinating. I love
It
this.
is.
I love this. Now, I find a lot of parents, I was guilty of this when my children were younger, and I feel like as parents, we have this idea that children have to eat. It's like this going back to warrior times or even
Yeah.
age times where we're on a mission, we have a child needs to eat. So
Yes.
we might distract them with screen time so they
Yeah.
can eat. But
Yes.
now I'm noticing a trend at a restaurant. Children will have their iPad while they eat, or even a mother actually feeding the child themselves.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the impact of screen time and meals, and why do children tend to eat more when there's a screen involved?
Yeah. I think it can be helpful to kind of first validate that, it comes obviously from the most well-meaning place, in terms of,
Mm,
as a good parent, you want to make sure your child's getting nutrition, and it's a very normal thing, like as
yeah.
parents, that's what we want to do. I suppose if we're looking at screens, what I would do is, like you said, obviously it often can get some more bites in, but it can be then at the expense of what we want meal times to look like, which is a time of connection and interaction.
Mm,
It can mean they're not quite taking in that sensory experience and learning about that food. And it can be harder, see, then to work on that interoception and hunger and fullness, and connecting the dots between I feel hungry,
mm,
I eat to fill my tummy, and then I feel better, sort of thing, is sort of that bit of disconnect. Um, what I'd often do is kind of reflect on the journey so far with the parents. So, how did we get from the baby in the high chair that might have eaten everything to you need a screen to eat and I'm spooning every single mouthful and it's a battle and
yeah.
it's painful and everyone dreads it, and it's just not what we wanted our meal times to look like. So, sort of thinking about, how did we get here? What was it? And if, was it concern about that they were rigid dropping their foods, or they weren't eating, they're not eating as much as they used to, and maybe then, dietitian and reassurance, or about the nutritional intake, so that you can feel more relaxed to know they're getting enough,
Mm,
so we don't have that pressure. Was it sensory overload, and maybe they need a sensory diet or support and an OT, you can refer. Is it they're having chewing problems and oral motor skills? Here's where our team comes in, and then
yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
the speech therapist can help. So just, if we can think about the reason why, that can help inform obviously what we're going to
Yeah.
do about it. Um, I would look at, I've got this tool, like a booklet about neurodiverse kids and mealtimes, and working through with your child, like, what do you enjoy? What's hard about mealtimes? Do you like, we talk about the mealtime environment, and think about the lighting and the noise level. And often we don't think to necessarily look at that, but the smells in the kitchen. And so I work through, like, what is it that might help the child in terms of environmental
Mm,
kind of changes to feel better at meal times. Um, Otherwise, looking at, like, the big picture of, what do you want meal times to look like in your family? Like,
yeah.
we want it to be connection, and maybe we can work on even 5 minutes of conversation. You can get those fun conversation cards, or telling a joke, or playing would you rather, or something, just to
Yeah. Yeah.
start
Yeah.
drawing them often back to the food.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, things like placemats, I often use them
Yeah.
quite often to, like,
Yeah.
we want to engage the kids, engage their curiosity about the food. So if we can sort of have them doing something, looking at something, giving them tools to do that, that can help
Yeah.
as well to bring away from the screen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not an easy process, can I
No.
just say? It's not just,
Yeah.
I've seen some families that say, okay, discipline, no more screen
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
until you eat,
Yes. Yeah.
until that
Yeah.
condition,
Yes.
right? But
Yeah.
it's so much more than the behavior or the
Absolutely.
discipline around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's understanding a child's sensory preferences, their sensory profile, their nervous system,
Yeah.
your own mealtime expectations, even
Yes.
cultural, I'm assuming
Oh, yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's why I really feel, even if you're listening to this podcast, it's nice to take this with a grain of salt and understand it. But
Yeah.
if you're really struggling, do seek out, see a dietitian or a feeding specialist like Rachel, who can really tailor the therapy and process specific to you and your family.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So there's no one right way to do meal times, especially with neurodivergent families. And often there's
Mm,
kids with multiple needs and different sensory preferences. And some kids can't even, in terms of sensory, like they can't even sit at the table because watching other
yeah,
people eat is too much. And
it's
so
too
the child's
much.
eating separate.
Mm.
And there's no easy answers or like you have to do it this way. Like we really have to work with for each individual family.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all this wonderful insight. I feel it would give parents a different perspective, but also open up the window about dietitians. I feel like we don't
Yes,
discuss that enough.
yes, yes, definitely. We
Yeah.
just had a bit of a brainstorm or ideas on our um, disability dietitians Facebook group about
Mm.
situations where as a dietitian you've helped a child might have been doing feeding therapy or trying different things for so long, and then the dietitian came on board and well, they were anemic, or of
Yeah.
course they weren't going to be eating, they were on a feeding tube and they was getting the full nutrition from the tube, and they weren't hungry at all for food.
Yeah.
And once we weaned them off the tube, then they could actually start eating. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely can be an important part of the picture.
Yeah. So thank you again for sharing this insight. I'm now curious more, not the dietitian role, but as a mother
Yeah.
of a child with a with a neurodivergent child. Many families listen to this on Wine with Wita, and I feel when they hear other families going through it, particularly health professionals, it takes that professional role off and that you then create that connection.
Yes.
Please tell the listeners about your journey and how that has changed you as a professional in with working with other families.
Oh, so much. I look back and just think, before you have kids at all, that changes your practice a lot.
No
But
dummy, no screen time.
oh yes, yeah.
My child won't have a tantrum.
No, no, they won't know about McDonald's. And yeah, um, definitely changed completely, and um, just that level of understanding and compassion, and just
Yeah.
knowing, like, when I suppose having been on the receiving end of being dismissed and almost like gaslighted and feeling
Mm,
totally invalidated for so long, and the blank stare or the like, well, you just have to make them. What do you mean they won't? Like, you're the parent, you
yeah.
can make them, like, and no, you can't, and so just being on the receiving end of that for so long and feeling like we were struggling, really, really definitely changed the practice and the lens that you look
Yeah.
at it. Most definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess there's that connection that you've created. Your own concerns that you experienced are validated through another parent, which then creates that beautiful rapport and trust where you've been on the back end of it,
Yes.
lived experience. So you know what? I know how hard it is. I know how exhausting it is. I know the invisible looks that you get from other people,
Yeah.
but there's always that but. You
Yeah.
will get to it with the
Yes.
right support. And I feel like your story would connect with so many families.
Yes. And I know some of your other guests have spoken about, and yourself, just about your practice, and you get so attached to your clients and connected. And I feel like just having gone through it just helps that so much. And my clients know
Mm,
that if their child has a meltdown or they're having a hard day and they're not coping, or their siblings not coping and everything's falling apart, because I do home visits and I'm in their home, and I'm
yeah,
so honored to
it's
do that
different.
and be in their environment. And they know, like you can just relax. My child has meltdowns too. We know they're not a bad kid, they're just having a hard time, and we can just
Yeah,
support them through it. Yeah, it makes all the difference.
it does. And that's what creates a beautiful relationship too, which is so amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Rachel, thank you for sharing all your wonderful insight and personal lived experience on Wine with Wita. Throughout the conversation, you mentioned that you have certain resources. Would you be open to sharing them and how parents can access them?
Sure, definitely. So I have a couple of things available. So there's the booklet about sort of neurodiversity and mealtimes and helping your child kind of
Mm,
work through um, so that everyone's feeling more relaxed. It can be sort of a nice starting point and framework for how can we make mealtimes better. So that is available. I also have a guide called Overcoming ARFID and Extreme
mm,
Picky Eating. And so that's kind of a bit of a step-by-step guide. It includes a placemat that you can use at the table. So one of those things where you can print it out, laminate it, give your child a texter, a marker, and they can do it. Or depending on their age, you could do it as a family. You might have a new food in the middle of the table, and you can work through. And it really just helps cover those first 3 steps to eating, like looking and touching and smelling, and draw out their curiosity. And that booklet has other ideas in as well
mhm,
that
mhm.
the parents can use. Yeah.
And if people want to access you as a pediatrician, I know you do home visits, but where I'm based in Sydney and a lot of listeners are based from Melbourne and Sydney, can they have online sessions with you?
Yeah, definitely. So I've developed a feeding program which is designed to
Mhm,
be delivered 100% online. And it's really just, as a health professional, you just, starting from like 30-minute consults in a medical center, which is just ridiculous and
not
impossible
enough. Yeah.
towards that therapy model, which is better.
Mm,
But it still doesn't quite, I found it wasn't enough, because it's good to come in for an hour a week or an hour a fortnight, but feeding happens three
mm.
times a day, every day, and often these families, like I did, feel like they're drowning, and it's just
Yeah.
so hard. So I wanted something that really helped to bridge that gap and really give that bit more
Mm,
support. So the way I work online is through a feeding program, which I've kind of developed through all my research and training, as well as with a child psychologist and OT, so sort of developed. So it's a bit of a multi-disc program,
yeah.
and it's a hybrid model. So it is online with therapy with the child, and we have some lovely, exciting, innovative ways to build the connection and incorporate the play and make it fun.
Yeah.
And then sort of online resources and modules and things combined with
Great.
the parent support to help them implement it. So
Yeah.
it's exciting. Families have been going really, really well. So online is no
That's
problem at
great.
all. Yeah.
I have a number of clients that I'm going to refer to you tomorrow.
Cool.
Because when I see them and they're only eating the pancake with Nutella every Monday morning, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
we need to go see Rachel, because
Yeah.
this poor mother is just so, she's at her ends. She's at
Yes.
her wits' ends, and
Yeah.
she's like, I need
Yeah.
someone.
Yes.
Yeah, you can be the Miss Rachel.
Yes. Yes. I love it when I arrive and I hear from the inside of the house, Rachel's here. And
Rachel's
yeah.
here. I love it. I love it. Well, for everyone, all of Rachel's information will be included in the show notes, including her Instagram, which she provides lots of lovely resources for you to learn from, as well as her website. Rachel, as you've heard on Wine with Wita, I ask all my guests a question. If you were to be a better version of yourself tomorrow, what word will you apply to yourself today?
The word I tell all my clients, and I don't do it to myself enough: self-compassion. Like, offer
Compassion.
yourself compassion. Like, you're doing your best, and that's good enough, and no parent's perfect.
That's right. It's so hard to apply, but yet
Oh,
be
it is.
compassionate towards
Yes.
yourself and give yourself grace. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Rachel, for coming on Wine with Wita this evening. It's been a pleasure finally to meet you and to talk with
Yes.
you. And for everybody else, another episode of Wine with Wita will be brought to your ears really soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Wine with Wita. I hope you found some new inspiration, learnt something new, or gained a fresh perspective. If you enjoy this episode, I'd be so grateful if you please leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the show get in the ears of new listeners, plus it takes 5 seconds. If you're keen for more strategies and insights, then head over to Instagram and follow RS Speech Pathology.